All right, Greg, we'll go ahead and get started today. Busy week, and we're going to be on the road next week, and we've got other stuff lined up. And thank you. I just want to start out by thanking all of our listeners, and we appreciate it. We've got a nice little growing audience. Please reach out to us if you have any questions or share some of the episodes with your friends. We do appreciate those of you who've been reaching out and giving us feedback on some of the episodes. It's been great and allows us to talk about things that you all want to hear. So I wanted to start to make sure I give a shout out to our listeners because we just jump into
Yeah,
things and go and go and go, and sometimes forget that people are actually going to be listening to us. They're just not on the call right now. But the idea is today we're talking about what is a lot of people talk about now today, and it's called situational awareness or situation awareness. But
yeah,
this is a topic that we talk about and we teach, but in a much different manner in which it's grown to today, which is kind of interesting. And I wanted to briefly hit up this kind of term, and we'll give our definition of the term, which falls in line with what the standard definitions really are. But this is a term that's even though it's been around for a really long time, it really wasn't starting to get used until about 100 years ago or so, specifically, in the military with pilots and pilot has to have situation awareness within his environment to fly the plane, but it's also interacting with machines while it's doing that. So it gets a little bit more complex. And then, as you kind of move forward, you know, John Boyd really hit on situational awareness with his OODA loop. I think, you could probably call SA the first part of that OODA loop: observe, orient, maybe even decide. But he kind of hit on that, and it still stayed in sort of the pilot community and then the computer industry. And so that's sort of where it sat. And then all the way up until literally the 80s and 90s, when a lot of folks really started studying it. And I know that's when you were doing it too,
yeah.
and had your version and your 6 domains for the comprehension part, which we'll talk about. But the idea is I'll put some links up in the episode details. There's some great
Sure.
stuff that really got started with different human factor studies, specifically within the Air Force. And this Dr. Micah Ensley, she was the chief science officer for the Air Force, and she kind of did these human factor study for people to understand how to interact better with machines, right, and then other people. And what she said is situational awareness is the perception of the elements in the environment within a volume of time and space, the comprehension of their meaning, and a projection of their status in the near future. And that was been out there. She kind of wrote that down in her stuff, but that was sort of the term at the time already established. And I just mention her because there's other people, because they really did a lot of groundbreaking research, and then along with folks even like on our advisory board, Dr. Joan Johnson, doing the human factor stuff with the tactical decision making under stress, with the USS Vincennes attack. I mean, this all is kind of everyone's in the same orbit of what they're talking about, because it's decision making. But before you can decision make, you got to sense make. And in order to sense make in your environment, you have to understand what it is that you're seeing. So there has to be some perception, there has to be some recognition, and then there has to be the most important part. So what? What the hell do I do with all this information? Right. And that gets into mental models. And then I run into something called barriers to situational awareness, things that get in my way, which are the limits of cognitive performance. And this is what all these folks were finally really trying to study and put down on pen and paper, and put some terms to it. And you can go back and read, because they were even trying to figure out, well, what do we call this? Well, is that situation understanding, or is it awareness? What's the difference? And we talk about elements in the environment, and some of them even made it simpler. They just went, the third thing was things in the world, right? You know what I mean? I was like, I actually really like that because it's so simple. It's like, look, there's
Right.
stuff out there, and that affects how you process information and what you process. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I think it's important because you were one of the pioneers of this in that same time frame, and
Yeah.
you weren't doing it in a lab. You weren't doing it
No.
in a
So
controlled environment. You were doing it on the street,
yeah,
but taking into account the science behind it, and where
yeah,
this came from. So I just wanted to at least start the conversation there, Greg, and then you can give your definition
yeah,
of
yeah,
situational awareness, and kind of we can go from there, I think.
yeah. And the meat and potatoes will be that definition when it builds out to practical application.
Yeah.
But I want everybody to listen for a minute and understand that the definition that Brian gave it is an amalgam of all the greatest thinkers of that
Yes.
time saying that no, change this, no, add that. The murder board was really essential to making that. So you got John Boyd, and John Boyd says, look, this is an understanding of the environment and its elements and how they change in space time, which was brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's his observe, orient. Okay, and that is the foundation, the fundamental necessity for his decision, right? So we went a different way. We said, well, it's sense making and that problem solving, and the problem solving drives the decision. Okay,
Yes.
the Air Force pilot said, and this is why we rely so much on NTSB in our training and some of the stuff that we do, Brian, is because they use all science all the time. Think of the artificial horizon. Why was the artificial horizon built? Because people weren't aware of where the ground was in respect to where they were flying in the event that they were using instruments only. Do you see what I'm saying? Which drives the computer end of it. So the technology added a level that took your awareness away from where you were spatially, right? So go ahead.
And let me sort of ask you this, because you brought up a good point. You said sort of we took the observe, orient, and then did the sense make, problem solve to get to the decision.
Exactly.
But here's let me ask you this, but here's why I think that's important. When it came to John Boyd, he was a fighter pilot, and he was
alone in the cockpit.
Yeah, but although he was talking about all these great complex scientific topics, it was within that context that he came up with that. Well, here's the thing. When you're getting to the decision part, and you're a fighter pilot, there's a finite list of decisions. There's only so many things, because there's only so many things that can happen. When you're out of that situation and you're just out in your environment, the complexity level increases, the number of things that can happen, the uncertainty increases, the ambiguity increases, because when you're in a cockpit as a fighter pilot,
that's why we had to go a different way.
It's less ambiguous than it is when you're on the street interacting with someone.
Right. But we also had the difference. The reason we knowingly and deliberately diverged was because we weren't traveling at Mach 2.
Right.
We didn't have an aileron. Our vehicle didn't drive our decision making. Our platform wasn't in charge of the response. So Boyd's stuff is wonderful and it's ingenious, but it's like being a swimmer. Okay, you're the only person that matters when they gunshot fires and you jump into the pool. It's you against everybody else. That was Boyd, and so Boyd was trying to capture what was going on and how he thought that you could outthink a cunning opponent. Well, we did the same thing, Brian, but the problem was that our stuff was chasing somebody through the backyards at night with a flashlight and a handgun and trying not to get killed or kill an innocent civilian and anticipate which one was going to be dangerous and which was less ambiguous, right? So the idea is that situational awareness is important for effective decision making in so many different fields, and that's why there's got to be a standard definition. But that's why it's also got to deviate when it comes to stuff like human behavior and human performance. So, for example, in human behavior, human performance, and if you've got a pen, start writing, folks. The first thing is anticipation. You have to anticipate what's likely to occur in certain situations. That's how we build file folders, and we'll go in a little bit deeper. Let me give them topically first. Then the second thing is perception. You observe an incongruent signal or an anomaly or a cue, okay? Then the third thing is recognition, that it is in fact a cue or an anomaly or a situation that needs your attention, meaning attending to it. Then comprehension, which is weighing that anomaly, knowing that it is in fact an anomaly and weighting the significance against the operational baseline you're in, because baselines change. And then finally, the projection.
Then it's
so
projection.
what? What do I do with it? I
think you started with projection there.
No. Anticipation.
Okay.
Sorry.
I thought you were talking about something else. I got you. So you're putting
anticipation, perception, recognition, comprehension, and projection.
So
and why? Because you don't, not everything that's a cue is equally weighted with something that's a danger cue or an operation or
so I'm listening to you explain like this, and so what I'm saying, or what I'm seeing in this, and what you're saying is sort of the discrepancy or the difference between that and the way other people are talking about this is you started with anticipation where everyone else starts with perception. And
Yes.
so if you're starting with, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but let me explain
Yeah.
this in the way I just received it. If I'm starting with perception, it's almost, ooh, a piece of candy. But I need to go back and go, should I expect there to be a piece of candy on the ground when I go into this environment? Because I have to
Exactly.
anticipate certain things going in, but doesn't that also affect, because the barriers to good situational awareness are human performance, cognitive
Yep.
performance. That's why we constantly slam on it. I don't give a shit who you are. There's only so much you can comprehend in your environment. I don't care what level of
Absolutely.
training experience you have. There are limits, no matter who you are or what you're doing. There are limits for you, and there are limits for maybe the person you're chasing or whatever the other person in there as well. But the idea is, if I start with this
Perception.
anticipation,
Right.
doesn't that then make it more complicated
No,
sometimes?
no,
Or
no.
can it but you get what I'm saying is, like,
Yeah,
you're
and
starting
people are
before perception.
stop with you guys at home. Stop with the gosh damn need to say it's potato or potato. You
Yeah,
got to back off the gas for a minute.
it's
So
close, right?
recently, I had a situation. Yeah, it's correct. So recently, especially in Ireland, recently you had a situation where a guy showed up at an accident scene with an AK. He got out of his vehicle, went
Yeah,
to the passenger side, brought out the AK, shot 3 cops immediately, and then get engaged in a shootout with the 4th cop, who subsequently killed him. Okay, those cops never anticipated
right.
that traffic crash would turn into the fight for their lives and kill 3 coppers. Okay, the guy with the AK anticipated that, Brian, because he saw the red and blues and he said, "This is my chance." That's the difference. So the difference is the perception comes after the comprehension comes after you have to anticipate what's going to happen likely today. Well, I anticipate the weather. I better take a jacket. It looks like it's turning cold. I anticipate, hey, it's a longer trip than I imagine. I better stop and get gas. That's where your training comes in. Your training comes in to build resilient, fidelity-filled file folders for likelihood. And likelihood means anticipation. Now,
Anticipation, right?
perception means I'm ambling through in my environment and I'm measuring and assessing those things that I see. Now, I look and I see a person with a gas can out in front of the city market with a sign. So I perceive that person. I recognize that that's a potential anomaly, and I comprehend the fact that it's likely a hobo that's going to be begging for money somewhere. Okay. Now, that perception, recognition,
Unhoused person.
comprehension changes. Yeah, yeah. Kiss my cock. The perception, recognition, comprehension changes when that person with the gas can is running towards the city market, and instead of carrying a sign, they're carrying a gosh damn road flare.
Road flare.
So,
Yeah,
but that's the essence of training. Look, you can understand all you want, and a definition helps you understand. But when you're sitting around going, no, the period should go here, no, add a comma, what you're missing is you're missing the practical application. So the most important part of situational awareness isn't the anticipation or the perception or the recognition or the comprehension. It's the projection. What do I do with this information? And that's what you get on people all the time.
yeah,
Look, having a bias for action is so critical in our training because
yes.
somebody will stop. Look, Brian, I read every time I'm at the dentist office or doctor's office, guns and ammo and modern combat and this and that and the other. And everything is keep your head on a swivel. Situational awareness
God,
is the single most important thing.
I think if
And with
you,
this holster, you'll get better essay.
it's like Beetlejuice. If you say it enough times, it'll
Yeah,
appear, right?
yeah. So the problem with that is that what they do is they stop short of even the definition. They give their own definition and say if you increase your essay, you'll increase your safety. That's not true at all. That one
It's
does not
absolutely not true.
correlate with another, right?
So stop on that.
Yeah,
Let's stop on
yeah,
that and go
please.
down that because that's, I don't think we've clearly articulated that before.
Okay.
And I think that's important for people to hear, in a sense that what do you mean when you say that? So what do you mean
So
when you
I
go,
will tell
yeah,
you, Brian, that hyper alertness leads to paralysis, leads to freeze or flee too late in the game. So the recognition, and I'll pair perception and recognition because they're close, and the comprehension that you're in there, all elements of SA are designed to warn you, but only if your anticipation is prepared for it. If not, you get caught flat-footed. And then what happens is your hyper alertness, oh, over there, whoa, what's that? Oh, piece of candy, like you said before, is making me play pinball in my environment and not attend to what I really want to attend to is my life. I want to drink and I want to screw and I want to drive
Yeah.
cars fast and I want to do all those other things. Well, I can't do that, Brian, because what I'm doing is I'm constantly weighing danger. You see what I'm trying to say? So that's not how life is. Life is full of danger and opportunity. Got it. But almost all of life is sedentary and relaxed and groovy. So what I need to do is hone only those skills for anticipation, perception, recognition, comprehension, projection that drive my essay. So I'm only going, what? Was that a gunshot? Rather than going around in every car that backfires, I'm returning fire. And that's what happens. What happens is somebody says, if you're more aware, so you end up being the Terminator. You're Arnold
Yeah,
Schwarzenegger
that's
looking
not
around for everything. And guess what? One, it takes too much time.
it.
Two, your environment is full of cues and clusters that go nowhere, that are meaningless. So if you don't assign weight or importance to certain pre-event indications and cues, then what you're doing is constantly searching for danger. And Brian, what happens when you constantly search for danger? Sooner or later, you're going to find it. And your all paths are going to lead to Rome. You're going to always be out there looking for danger in your environment, and you're going to miss
or
all these wonderful opportunities that are right there in front of you.
or or
Yeah,
you create a non-event feedback loop, meaning if I
precisely.
sit here and go, all I need to do is be more aware and pay more attention in my environment, and I'll be safer, and I start doing that all the time, and I never see anything. I never see incongruent behavior, never see an anomaly. I'm not talking about something, catastrophic. I don't ever see a threat. Then all I'm doing is conditioning myself that if as long as I stay in this state, nothing will ever happen, and I'll end up missing things. Does that make sense in a
It's
way like
absolutely it. It's
because
absolutely.
this is, because when you're bringing up this sort of process, and everything can be broken down in a sense to a process, but they're not separate, distinct, it's kind of like actually remember what Jason Piccolo was talking about when we were talking to him on his podcast, and he brought up like the Jeff Cooper's color codes. He's like,
Yep.
look, that's great, but it's not. Now I'm in this state. Now I'm in that state. Now I'm in this state. Now I'm in
Yep.
yellow. Now I'm in orange. Now I'm in red. Like
Now
that's
I'm in
not
Sing
how.
Sing.
That's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not how it works. You
It
can
can't
you
work that way.
but you
Now
can
listen, to
but what
describe
you're
it,
what you're talking about
yes,
here is but what I can do is I can have just being curious with my environment is something I can sustain over time. And this sort of way of
exactly.
priming myself for that is what you're calling anticipation, right? I
Right.
can anticipate certain things so that I'm basically psychologically priming myself for
That's
the
exactly what
for the
you're
for
doing.
the, for,
But you're
for the next.
physiologically priming yourself too. You're bringing those file folders and those chemicals that are in your body that help you, you're bringing them to the forefront. Would you, like, for example, let's go on a 2 mile run for time, Brian, and let's not worry about wearing the proper shoes or stretching or anything else. Let's just go now. Okay. And whatever you've got in your hands, that's what you're running with. Okay. So can you survive that 2 mile run? Yeah, but your feet are going to be sore and your
Yeah,
knees are going to
you're you're
knock and
you're
you're going
not
to lose the
you're not going to
paperwork.
have optimal performance by
You're not
doing it
going to be
that way.
efficient. So,
Yeah.
so the idea is if you anticipate that, hey, Brian, in 3.5 minutes, we're going to go for this run. Is there anything you want to do? Yeah, I'd like to throw in a stretch and put on some shorts and get my favorite shoes on. So the idea is that that's no different than me making the assessment that the weather's going to turn cold. So I'm going to take a gosh damn jacket and I'm going to add some fuel to the car because it's further than I thought it was. People make mistakes when they outrun their headlights. So, for example, Pat and Lynn, Shelly's mom and dad, they left. They went to see Craig in Utah, and then they drove back. So the first leg of their trip was longer than they anticipated. Instead of 5.5 hours, it was 9.5 hours.
Ooh.
Brian, they're in their late 80s.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
That's a significant game changing situation. And thank God they survived. But fatigue and
yep.
unknown factors on the road and, the weather, and now it's getting dark. And hey, do I have my other glasses? Brian, those things complicate stuff. So what Boyd said is here's certain factors you can control. And if you control them in optimal situations, then you'll have the tactical edge over an opponent. We say yes, but there's the reality of the situation that there's a whole bunch of components you can't control. So you have to anticipate the ones that you can, perceive the most dangerous situation that's forming in front of you, then recognize that, listen, this is something that I can do or flee, and then comprehend the weight of the gravity of the situation that you're facing. So then you can project likely outcomes. If you, in Your brain does it already, and your
Right.
brain does it in flipping
You,
nanoseconds. When you're bringing that hot cup of coffee up to your mouth, your brain is making the calculation of how to hold the cup, how far it is from your lips. Your body is tensing and sensing how hot is it going to be for my lips and my tongue, and and how much of an angle do I need to pour that first drop. So your
but
brain's already doing it. Don't think that it's going to take
but
time and be hard.
okay, great point. To kind of tie in everything we were both just talking about, because it sounds a lot more complex than really is. So if we
It
have a
really
good,
does.
because it is complex, but
Yeah.
it's something you do all the time. So I like that example, but um, the the problem with, and it was a great example, but the idea with that example is I have to learn that, right? I
Yes.
have to have some tacit knowledge that this is what I need to do when something is too hot for me to drink, or it's at that threshold where it might burn me a little bit. So if I
Yes.
don't know that this hot cup of coffee will do that to me, I'm going to gulp it down. I'm going to scald the inside of my mouth. So
And you
this is where it
may
gets,
die. You
so
may die. Right.
well, and that's how some of these catastrophic incidents sort of can happen, where it's almost they're not only do I failed to anticipate because I was never going to perceive or recognize anything because I didn't know it, right? And so
Exactly.
that's sort of the issue with what we're talking about, and I think that gets to the core of why we kind of see a lot of this stuff out there and are like, this is junk or it's not going to help. It's because if I don't know, if I'm starting with where I don't know how to look for things in my environment, what am I going to do? I mean, I can't just scan everything. I can't look into every corner. I can't do all that. And you know what? You don't need to. So the point is, I think that you're getting at is there's other elements that I can focus on. So this
Yes.
anticipation is, I need to understand that when I walk out the door, technically I could get struck by lightning.
Yes.
What's the likelihood today? Pretty low. It's a nice
And
sunny
so,
sky,
but
but
over time, it's so historically low
yeah,
that you duct taping a colander to your head and
yeah,
walking around with a metal rod dragging a wire to the ground is ridiculous. That's a state that you don't want to be in. And that's the same thing with having a gun, a drop gun, an extra high
yeah,
capacity magazine, two knives, a flare gun. And we see these people. Brian, we used to work with a guy that had a go bag with all of those things that they drug around with them everywhere that they went. And I would tell you that that's no fun in life. The idea is that certain things that you anticipate, you can take into consideration. And if your environment is dangerous enough that you have to carry a gun, that's fantastic. But all of that flipping tires and climbing the rope and doing the rapid reloads aren't going to help if you miss the anticipation, perception, recognition loop. If you don't
yeah.
comprehend that this is a real
Well,
life-changing and
and
altering situation.
this is why it kind of gets lost on people sometimes when we're talking about what we do, and or they'll see it and go, oh yeah, no, this makes sense, this is incredible, and so how do I work that into the range stuff that I'm doing?
Yeah,
It's like wait a minute, you
hold
jumped
on.
you
Yeah.
jumped so far ahead
Yes.
into, you're already at a decision, and you haven't even properly diagnosed the problem. You haven't
Yep.
even opened the door to the doctor's office, let alone seen the patient yet, right? And you haven't even laid out the different things that you're likely going to
So
use
true.
today, right? We're jumping to a decision, right? And we're assuming a lot in that big jump, that quantum leap of
Yep.
logic. You make a lot of assumptions, and those assumptions aren't true. And but what they do is create sort of inevitability. So if I go, oh, this person's definitely going to take off, it's like, okay, so we've got some recognition here, right? We're trying to project what would happen,
Yes.
but you know that now, yet you're still going to go walk up and do the same thing. Like,
Yep.
wait, stop. You can get yourself a little bit of time and distance here, but we don't do that. We go, yeah, see, I knew that was going to happen. It's like,
So
okay, you see what I'm saying?
to
So
over
even when there
you
is recognition, Greg,
yes.
it's not utilizing the information properly, and so the decision doesn't change. It's like,
No.
but the whole point is this recognition is in perception, and even anticipation is supposed to help me inform my decision, and I'm not using it. So it's like all of the
Exactly.
training and all the experience goes out the fucking window because I don't use it. Does
So
that make sense?
you're again fighting the good fight for your argument that if there's no bias for action, then why are we taking the training? Which I absolutely agree with. So I go back to the car analogy. Most people drive a car every single day of their life,
Hmm.
and when the dashboard red light comes on, they have two choices: fix whatever's broken or put a Band-Aid over it until it solves itself. And it's going to solve itself one day when you're on the freeway and you need it the most, and all of a sudden it breaks down. Now, the other part of that analogy for the vehicle is that you're driving around and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, your vehicle putters to a stop at the side of the road, and you immediately call for a wrecker and say, I want my transmission pulled, and have you take all the bolts and rebuild the engine and everything. And then the guy with the wrecker service says, yeah, you're just out of gas. That's the other thing is the recognition comprehension cycle is damaged. So if you add human behavior to human performance, what you now have is you have a gating mechanism for how decisions are made in any situation. And extremis only amplifies the necessity for a decision in a better space-time, in a more profound manner, more quickly, right? So all that means is, Brian, training will help you increase
right.
your acumen and decrease your time.
So anticipation, in a sense, is something that almost anyone can do within their life, and think of, it's almost the what if game in a sense, but within the realms of reality of what you're like in terms of likelihood, what you're likely going to see, right?
Yes.
And you can do that. Okay, so if I have that and I'm anticipating this stuff, now you've got this perception recognition part. Now that can be very difficult because based on your life experience and what you know and what you've learned, and
that's where you need the training.
Well, that's the thing. So what a lot of folks don't get into is that part, because it's typically domain specific. So like perception recognition for a pilot is one thing. For a person working with computers is another thing. But you brought up, and correct me to this, or what this was where the 6 domains, right, that you created, especially back for Combat Hunter, and it was around before that. But the 6 domains of human behavior fall into that perception recognition, because it's articulatable scientific terms that you can use anywhere, right? And they're observations you've made. Some you've already made before in the past.
Yes.
Some maybe you haven't, but you've seen something maybe close enough to where you can do that. You can
and
make
it's the essence of pattern recognition. Okay.
So,
and comprehension becomes the analysis.
Well, and this is where the mental models come in, and schemas of what people are talking about. So how does that work then? So we don't have to jump into all the 6 domains.
No, so
it's funny
because
I actually
I
saw someone write an article about situational awareness and talking about what the Army uses as their 6 domains. And I was like, yeah, dude, this is around 20 years ago. Like, what are you talking about? But anyway,
and you're making money on it, and you don't even understand it. So let me give you a quick example. And non-attribution, folks, you do your own independent study to prove us or disprove what we're saying. And it's all been proven, so I'll save you the time. But we're operating in a culture during the time, and remember, culture is merely context, where there were 5 prayer services a day, and that there were minarets and mosques, and a muezzin that was doing the call to prayer. And what happened is that the people that were operating in that environment that weren't Muslim or didn't follow the faith were going out on Fridays, and they were partying and having a good time and doing their dinner like they want to do back in the United States. And that started becoming targets for the terrorists that were in fact Muslim, that were, going old school on their ass. And a person said, well, how do we avoid this? And it's like, okay, well, first of all, you anticipate that you're not using culture as context, number one. So polish off your lens, clean off that dirt. The second thing that you're having is you're not perceiving that the reason that this is happening on there is it's not because you're an easy target. It's because they won't accidentally kill a Muslim, because they know they won't be out there on the Friday doing the partying. So the recognition and the weighted comprehension will add to you, well, can I project this to other places? Well, yeah, it's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen there. So, Brian, what you use is you use the incoming data in the information by first taking a look and see if there's a pattern. Yeah, there's a pattern they're hitting on this day. Then you take a look and you analyze it and you go, so what does that mean? And that's what they're not doing. They're just increasing their situation awareness with nothing on the back end. And so what happens is they go, well, situation awareness, this might be dangerous, so I need a weapon. Wait a minute. How did you make that quantum leap of logic and skip over all of these other things that say, so
well, you're arriving at
geographic.
You're arriving at a conclusion before even.
But it's an unreasonable conclusion. So people say, where did you come up with geographics? Long time ago, I stole it. And where did I steal it from? There was a caper in Canada right across the border from where I was in Detroit, and they were using geographic profiling. And I looked at that and I go, wow, that's brilliant because bad guys are familiar with areas. But what does that mean? And I said, well, I guess they have anchor points, places that are just for them. And then, well, they do go out into habitual areas, but they're very safe to follow natural lines of drift. Brian, it wrote itself. So
Yeah.
I needed the catalyst of somebody else to come up with the term geographics. Okay, it's like atmospherics. The Marines never understood atmospherics on the East Coast. West Coast Marines got it at hello. So my biggest fight for the Marine Corps was no, the atmosphere is not this band of air trapped around it's how things unfold, and you can tell like the people in an emergency room when somebody's having a baby,
it's that
you can
feeling or
tell the
mood. Yeah.
atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
And now if I can tell it there, can I tell it when I'm having chai in a foreign country? Can I tell it when I'm on a safari in Africa that something's gone terribly wrong? I can tell it on an airplane because I'm on
Well,
airplanes every week,
and
right?
that's a tie to not only your environmental indicators, but that's
Right.
also tied to your cognitive performance, your limbic system that's already sensing your environment going, hey, something doesn't feel right here. Even though you
So,
can't clearly, consciously articulate it, that's that man that when people go, I had that feeling, that gut feeling, my hinky button was going off.
yep.
That's what it is. And what, it's just sensing your environment. That's literally your amygdala just going, hey, there's something up here. I'm picking up on a shift
Exactly right.
in the feeling or mood here, and because I had to have this a long time ago to stay alive, I'm warning you about that through that
So
feeling.
it became a domain, Brian. And physiological and psychologically, we can manifest it. And
Yeah.
sociologically, it shows itself. So what am I trying to say? Again, I'll street it up for you. If you understand cuidado, peligro, you're understanding danger words in Spanish. But if those are the only words I learn, I can't turn them into a sentence. And I can't make that paragraph to explain something to somebody else and get people to safety. So what I'm doing is I'm anticipating that I'm going to need language skills, but I want to carry on without the training. Why? Because training takes money and time and a long. And so if I'm fluent in situation awareness, or I'm fluent in Gulf Arabic, or I'm fluent in Farsi, I'm going to get farther in that baseline or environment, right? So situation awareness is a tool to be able to untangle the complexity of any situation in any environment, but you got to learn how to do it. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to be more situational. And you know why? Because you're going to be more alert when you die. You're going to be more alert when you get robbed or you get carjacked. And that's not the key. The key is there's a cycle. And once you understand that cycle, then you can look, we don't talk about situation awareness a lot because we're so fluent in it that these
Well,
5 steps become one step. You see,
yes, and this
that's
is
only through training and experience.
right, and this is part of why some people sort of criticize not us or criticize it. I mean, criticize these different models of situational awareness that are out there because it's complex and because it involves environmental indicators, it involves your mental models, it involves
Yes,
just fucking catecholamines and hormones in your body and your
yes,
limbic system, what's primitive in your DNA versus what you've learned. There's so much complexity in there that you have to refer to it in general terms, right? Even
yes.
though there's so many cognitive processes involved that are very specific that you can map out and a neuroscientist could tell you about, you can't just go into the detail of that. Like we cover things about the eye and the brain and how you process information, but the point of that is to go, look, you're not seeing everything that you think you're
Yes.
seeing. There's perception is different than seeing the real physical world, what's happening, the objective world it is
So
different than your experience. So people then go, well, what about this or what about that? And I get it. And it's like we do the everyone wants the ice cube trays, right? And
they
we
do
use this one all the time. And they want the frozen little ice cubes in each one of
with a
these
little
things.
baby flag on it.
And
You're
and
right. That
and you
says a thing.
you can't. We still use the ice tray, but the fucking ice is
Exactly.
melted and there's water in there. And if you tip it a little bit this way, then some of the other buckets get more full and the other ones empty out. And that's what we mean when we say that is these are complex cognitive processes that you
Yes.
can name. You can go through and go, here's
Yes.
what this means, here's where that happens, here's where that happens.
But we
The
choose not
but the
to.
difficult, but because we do the
Exactly.
difficult part is putting it together and the fucking so
Exactly.
what? How do I do that? And that's more important than understanding, heuristics enough to speak at a university about it. It's complex, it's cool, it's
Right.
fascinating. But so what? This is what that means. That means that in that situation, due to the limits of your cognitive performance, when that
Yeah,
guy pulls a cell phone out of his pocket, you saw a gun. Okay, that's what
close
that
enough.
means. And
Yep.
because your brain said it's close enough to what I've seen before in training, it's a gun. I need to kill this person before they kill
Yeah.
me. There's how many different cognitive processes involved in that decision. You could take one case and study it the rest of your life and still not understand all of them. Okay,
Yes.
but the important part is what we're talking about here is the so what. I don't care if you can tell me what, how much the appropriate levels of cortisol or dopamine and how that affects you. That's not fucking important. The important thing is what was the
Exactly.
decision? What did you do? How did you use the information? Right?
So
As
so
long as it
as an
falls in
as a
line.
major league player, as an expert, I spent my entire life creating the expert model so you don't have to do all that independent
Right.
study. So you don't have to go back through there. And that's the idea. That's what sets me apart from all these charlatans that are out there just speaking the words, but they don't understand it. I'll give you one. Okay. Sex is an important thing in humans because of procreation. So there's a part of your brain and brain's chemistry that when sex gets really messy and ugly and certain things happen because there's fluids involved and everything else, that your brain tunes it out and you can still stay romantic and stay in the moment to procreate. That exact same situation that occurs in your brain and the chemicals happens when somebody vomits or is shot and is bleeding out or has an atrophy during giving birth. So you can fight past the mess and the gore and the hate and get in there and do something. The same thing. Now it's like cylinders on a revolver. It turns just a little bit, Brian, to the next one. When you witness a catastrophic death of a familiar, somebody that you know, that you can get back up and get into the fight and get out of the situation and go on with your lives. So those mechanisms are hardwired into humans already. Now, sometimes because of the limits of human performance, we get PTS and we're
Hmm.
bothered by this and we
There,
can't, or
yeah,
we're so overwhelmed that we commit suicide. But the main body of humans don't. The main body of humans keep marching forward. So all of my research, everything I do is on that main body of humans, not the outliers, Brian, because the
yeah,
outliers were meant to fall away and
and they don't
perhaps in
anymore.
situations not to survive. So what I don't do is sit there and spend all the class with a glossary and definitions and
Yes.
rate you on the definitions. What I do is I say, this is CPR. It's very hard, but this is Heimlich. It's very easy. Now, do me a favor, save a choking person. That's what we've built for almost 50 years now, Brian, and that's what makes it different. So people are out there and go, yeah, well, we focus on this and that and the other. Yeah, you know what? I don't need to know the fine thread diameter of the nut and the rough opening of the hole. You're making a great point of that. What I need to understand is that if I anticipate and train to anticipate, and I understand perception, and that recognition drives the comprehension that this, in fact, is a prevent indication of violence, danger, opportunity. Somebody's flirting with me, sex, right? All of those different things. Then guess what? I can project that information, and that's my ML or MD COA. So this shit didn't happen by accident, Brian. These
Yeah.
were studies, and it took me years and to get the right things together. And you know what the greatest thing about? Other people paid to study it, and I was given the opportunity to try it in the most extreme environments on earth. That's what separates us, because it's
That's
wonderful having a theory and go into a classroom, but if you never get out into the real world and do it over and over and over again, how can you prove it?
and you brought up these remarkable moments that are outliers or people that we
Yes,
people are fascinated with, and you're fascinated with them because it's not normal. It is a remarkable
it's
situation or personal thing.
exceptional.
And so we then get focused on that because that's odd. And it's like, well, yeah, that 100,000 years ago, they wouldn't have survived. We wouldn't have had that. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? That they would have been kicked out of the
And
tribe, or
it
they would
sounds
have been.
harsh, but that's the truth.
But that's the thing is like now we do. That's why we have all this different stuff. We have more complexity or different variants because people are alive today and procreating,
Exactly.
and they wouldn't have been a long time ago. So it gets a little bit more complicated. And we stick to this simple stuff, like you said. The big part of the group is what you need to focus on because 99.99% of the time that's what it is. And then in those rare, remarkable moments, if
Right.
you have the understanding of what's normal, a really good understanding of that, you can then use your own knowledge and skills that you already have to deal with it. It's like we
Yes.
we And because that gets into the training aspect of what people look at for training. And it's like, well, you're doing this stuff that like, what you're spending all this time and effort and resources, money into doing something that almost you're completely unlikely to ever use or see.
Yes.
But it's like you won't spend that same amount of time, effort, and resources into something that you're going to do every single day. It's
Right.
just we don't see it that way because we go, this is the big shiny thing. And since we don't fully understand it, my opinion is, we do this stuff out of fear. And we do this stuff because we don't
Absolutely.
understand it. And so when we don't understand something, we freak out about it and we got to find a way to deal with it because it could kill. I mean, I think it's just a very primitive limbic reaction to some of these things. And that's what drives our thinking when that's so rare and remarkable that it's unlikely to ever even see that, let alone be involved in the actual incident.
So the inevitability factor comes to play
We
again. Brian, you're
create it.
so smart because we create the environment. So we say 9mm needs a brother, and 38 and 380 aren't
Well,
the brother that they need. So now it's 10mm, which is off of
that's
that,
the
but the
thing.
45.
And then what
And
did everyone come back with after decades of doing that? Going, well, I guess it doesn't matter because it's actually the only thing that matters is where that round hits. Like, yeah, no
okay.
shit.
And so
I could put a hole the size of yeah, I don't know, a bowling ball in someone and they could live, right?
yes,
If it
people
doesn't
have been
hit a
hit.
vital
We saw
areas,
people hit by RPGs that had the nose cone still in their
and they
body
lived.
that was taken out, and they're living a good life today. So the idea, Brian, is that the remarkable becomes the anomalous and the incongruent becomes the cue. But you have to be trained how to look for that, because if you aren't, it's like the first time that you do a Kim's game and you're a little bit overwhelmed, but then all of a sudden the idea comes across you. And remember, it's keeping memory, stupid. No, it's not. It's named after Kim, Rudyard Kipling. Go do
No,
your own
I
research,
was
right?
told
But
that the Marine Corps sniper community created that and it was keeping memory sniper. And
oh, there
I
we
was the one
go.
raising
So,
my hand,
but
like, wait a minute, isn't this
but
from
what
a
does that
book?
prove? That proves good ideas stick around,
Yeah.
and just improving your memory does nothing for you in a situation. But now, what is the cue? Well, I started categorizing tattoos. We would find a dead female sex worker, what we used to call a prostitute, and the damage was significant. And so I had a list of different females that work different areas, their characteristics, their physical characteristics, but more important, certain outstanding features like a tattoo or a peg leg or a gosh damn eye patch or whatever the hell it was. Why? Because those things help define that it was this person, not another person. Okay. So that pattern I had to recognize, which would drive with the analysis that this decomposing corpse is in fact this person. But we don't need that now. Why? Because there's stuff called DNA. Okay. So those catalogs, Brian, those huge, vast repositories of information that I had, they're outdated now. But the process is the same, isn't it? So now I use a computer. Now I use big data. Now I use all these other things. So the anticipation is the most dangerous part of police work. Why? Because you're driving up to the scene and you're thinking of all these millions of things that can happen. So if you can tell a cop to calm down at that phase, and that perceiving things like, hey, that person leaving as you're so focused on showing up at the scene might be a great witness, or they might be the suspect that's leaving the scene. And
Right.
then you recognize I'm in the situation. Holy crap, this is a little bit different. There's people that are dead here, and that weighs more than, it's more significant than the previous incidents I was in. So I have to ramp up my game. Brian, it's a process that you train yourself, and it's just like there was a TV show, Love Eating. There was a TV show where two chefs went to a street, and one went on one house and one went across the street to the other house, and they had to compete with everything that was in the pantry or in the kitchen of those two houses. I loved that shit, because what
Yeah.
you are is you're handed
Yep.
a shit
You
sandwich
don't know.
and said,
Yeah.
go. That's
That's a,
police work. That's
yep.
life. That's coming home to your husband or old lady cheating on you. That's your kid bombing the math test. That's life.
And that's adaptability. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So you really get thrown a bunch of things that you're not used to using or haven't
Yeah,
used before in the past, and you got to create order out of chaos, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what we're
that's
talking about, is
exactly what it is. So,
creating order out of chaos.
Brian, I walk into a chef's class, and I see the one person that has that chef hat, the Boyardee with all the folds in it. And I go, hey, what's with the hat? Why doesn't everybody have a hat? And they're like, well, they're not at his level. So he's the expert. Yeah. Well, what defines him as an expert? And a guy looked at me and said, each one of those folds is a different way to cook an egg, to prepare an egg. And because he knows more about how to prepare an egg than anybody else, each one of those folds, 113 or whatever, 109 folds, make him the expert because I only know 30 egg dishes. That's brilliant. Brian, if you can't unpack that and take a look at that and go, holy crap, he's talking about file folders. He's talking about tacit knowledge, experiential knowledge. And guess what?
But
I can gain a certain amount of that through the proper training.
okay.
Education won't take me there, but training will.
But again, and this is, your chef's example is great, and I get it, but it's sort of domain specific, right? That
Yeah,
doesn't
of
mean he
course.
can go
Life
work
is domain specific.
okay, but that doesn't mean he can go it doesn't mean he can go work on your car, but what it does mean,
Exactly. Or
what it
do a
does
gynecological exam or any
well,
of the
maybe if he
exactly.
can, he
I've tried.
just might
I've tried.
it's just
The
that
hat
was
gets in the way. I
yeah,
will
the
tell you
hat.
that.
You thought it was, you mistook the outfit for a doctor,
Sometimes
and
it's the hat.
he was a
Exactly.
chef.
We weren't
So
even at a hospital.
yeah, that was an alley. He wasn't
Exactly.
wearing anything under his lab coat either.
We were abused.
But the idea here's my point I want to get, because I'm listening to what you're talking about, and everything is about, well, you got to be this subject matter expert, you got to be this guru, you got to have this level of stuff. And the way I would look at it is to use your chef's example, who's a subject matter expert in this domain, and he's brilliant. That doesn't mean he can't take everything that he knows and apply it to a different situation. So
Exactly.
can he? I mean, literally, you give the car example. There's something wrong with his car. Well, maybe he can take something from his life and know, well, I know from this that this is likely happening, and you know what? It's past my level of what I can do here. And I know, because I'm a subject matter expert and I like to stick to cooking what I do, I'm gonna let someone else work on my car. Right. But
Right.
we don't do that. We go, okay, I got this. You know what I'm saying? And
Exactly. So the stuff
and
you do get
but,
is the stuff that's least
but
important. For example, go
what I'm bringing
ahead.
up here
Yeah.
is the question, I guess, would be then, well, we're talking about these different complex subjects and how to do it, and maybe I have some experience in observing or situational awareness, or I thought I did. How do I use what I already know in these? Like,
Yeah.
because that's what we talk about, is drawing on my own experiences to then go to recognize, to perceive in that part in the environment, is how do
But
how can I
that's
do
where
that
you
then?
have to be shaped by experts. Brian, when you're young and you're a boy or a girl, you run everywhere.
Yeah.
You're good looking enough that you can get in anybody's pants anytime that you want to. And you're clever enough to do that because you've rehearsed it your entire life. That's what life is about. When you're young, you play until the streetlights come on, and then you go home. You eat superfluous amounts of food because you're going to be burning it off.
Yeah.
You never think of those things. So cognitive acumen is less important, right? But then all of a sudden you start encountering conundrums. Well, how do I get out of the house and get down and get the car started so I can go and party with my friends? Well, those challenges, I now have to meet environmental specialists. So what I do is I meet the kid in my class that goes, oh yeah, man, you can make a tat with a gosh damn knitting needle and some heat and some India ink. And I learn these street things that come along. And then somebody goes, yeah, man, but you can get a horrible infection. So it makes more sense to do that. All of those complex things are like one of those ancient string things that they hang on a wall now, the memory keeper or whatever they call that, God's eye. There's a whole bunch of different names for them. You come to these junctures in your life and you choose those things. I choose what it says in the Bible. I choose what my mom told me. I choose that Uncle Paul always said, never, talk when you eat because you might choke. Those things become lessons. And so then I either learn from those lessons, okay, and I adapt and overcome new situations, or I don't. And if I don't, then I become a failed to thrive, and I never leave the basement, and I'm still living with my parents, and they're taking care of me. Okay, well, then you don't have to worry about SA because you're never going to get out of the damn house. But the rest of us have to get a job, and the rest of us have to go out and encounter other humans. So what do we model that behavior on? Well, if we're constantly modeling that behavior on the wrong type of subject matter expert, then we're going to continue to make those mistakes. So the difference between education and learning, training, is that we have a skill that we can apply to this situation, but also use the same elements to project it on the next. So anticipation now and anticipation for future events is critical, and we don't normally get that on our own. We need a parent or a significant other or a guide or a coach to take us there.
Well, and this gets into the training aspect, and that's why I kind of brought it up and asked a question of what we're talking about. It's like, well, okay, well then what am I supposed to do? And ideally, if I could learn one way to do something and use it in every situation, well, that's magic, right? Because then I
That's
can just get
science.
really, 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 really good at this one thing and use
Exactly.
it in multiple areas. And that should sort of be the goal, right? Meaning if I have to learn all of these different methods for all of these, it's you always give the comparison between CPR and the Heimlich maneuver. The Heimlich maneuver is
Yep.
the Heimlich maneuver. It's always been the same exact thing.
So
CPR
simple.
every few years now, it's like changing. Well, now they're saying I think it's you don't even have to actually breathe. I think it's just chest compressions, right?
Right.
And like there's no breathe. Like it's like so
But
you
I don't
just
even
look.
need to do it because there's an AED right there on the wall.
Well, that
Right.
yeah, I think
So
that's
exactly.
but that's the thing is like we come up with these sort of tactical level solutions, these TTPs, these different policies, and we're missing the sort of big picture on how to do things. And
But isn't it the same with overdoses now? So
uh,
fentanyl, and this is horrible, and people are dying.
yeah,
So I read an article, and the article says you as a human being have to get better at being a first responder, no matter what your life goals are, because you're going to have a whole bunch of people that are falling out around you that are overdosed, and you're going to have to do something about it. So we've forgotten all the other stuff that we can do to stop the drugs and
right,
educate the people and all that other stuff. And
right.
we're just going to
So
assume
we're just
that
gonna
people are
jump
going to
right
be
to
overdosing
this.
around us. And you see what I mean? Isn't
Yeah,
that the same? So the
yeah,
logic is, Brian, that if I can grasp that there are certain things, science and math and language ability, that lubricate the rails and make it easier for me to get from point A to point B with less friction, and friction is where the danger comes from, right? Then I've got it made. But it takes effort. You got to get up, you got to get dressed in the morning, you got to get out of the gosh damn cave, and you got to go learn. Because first of all, you can't do it from a book. Books are great, and I hear these people quoting stuff all the time. Well, if that book is going to stop a bullet, or you can use the book to hit the guy that's going to, rob and rape your daughter, I guess you got it made. But if not, you're going to have to step out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to, get comfortable, as you say, with being uncomfortable, and you're going to have to learn some shit. Brian, do you need every martial arts move that you've ever learned? Now, there's a couple of really
no,
great things
no,
about
yeah,
stance and about
yeah. There's a
leverage, momentum, and balance
right.
that will help you be safe. So the fundamental principles are the key, the core essential principles that people have taken hundreds, if not thousands of years to perfect are more important than the shit that you're reading about right now. So get thee to the nunnery, get out of your comfort zone and go learn them. That's why training is so much more than education. Theory is wonderful. As a matter of fact, our textbook is the theory of
Yeah,
HPPRNA,
but those are
because we
the
presuppose that you're going to take that knowledge and go out and do it. That's where
yeah.
you really learn something.
No, and that's exactly it. It's okay. This is the core elements. Look, read about it, go try it out. Here's an example. Now you go find your own example. Now
Yes.
that's not only how it's
Bring
a
me
better
that
way to
example to show me that you know
right.
it.
And
Right. So now we have a check on learning,
here's a
right?
video of us showing you an
Exactly.
example of it. Now you go out and find yours. And so
And
that's
that cosmic gosh damn what do you call that? The where you go out and you gather something, from each person, and then you come back. What's that called? Where
pickpocketing, stealing.
no, no, no,
Oh,
no.
sorry.
When you make a game out of it, and everybody's
Scavenger
got to
hunt.
go out, it's scavenger hunt. So that cosmic scavenger hunt, Brian, is so essential to demonstrate that learning has occurred. It's just the most amazing thing. And do people do it? No, people don't spend their time doing it. And that's how you train your kids, isn't it? And if your kid turns out screwed up, we're constantly looking for, this is the school shooter profile. There is no
Yeah.
profile. We're constantly looking for this to look, these prevent indications make it more likely that this person is going to do this in this time frame. That's training, baby. And training can help those scales fall from your eyes so you can see things as they are in your environment. What does that mean? Prediction can occur. How does prediction occur? There's anticipation, perception, recognition, comprehension, and projection. That's how you do it. And Brian, it's not tarot card reading, it's blackjack, where you can sit down and figure out the mathematical likelihood. Can you do that with humans? Yes. And people are saying right now, well, no, you can't, because this means that. No, the standard you're using is kinesics. You're out there using body language and saying the body language is going to solve for X. Now,
No.
the body language is pepper on your steak or the barbecue sauce that is in your ramekin that you dip at the end of the day. If all these other things are
Right.
happening and you have this, it's more likely that this is going to go. That's how it goes. And you know what? All those parlor tricks that people are showing on the videos and on YouTube and all that stuff, back off of that, because
Yeah.
that's ends
So
justification for shit you'll
of
never see
course, that's
in
what
real life.
that's what most of this becomes, and
I think
because
so.
it's so prevalent that a lot of this is what people are doing. And see this situation, if they would have done this, and that's why I do this. And it's like, well, you're just using ends justification to that.
Exactly.
There's no you haven't even tested that process in the real world. So good luck with that. But you get into it goes back to, I mean, you brought up a bunch of topics, and especially with the drugs and the fentanyl list. I just got one for
Yeah.
the insurgent school. It's like, hey, this is the new way to talk about, drugs with your kids. And I clicked on it, and I'm like, this is the same. It was actually great information, but it was like,
Right.
hey, talk to them about this,
Time
explain
tested
that. And
shit.
it's like, but there's nothing, there was
Right.
absolutely nothing new in it. I was the same way. I mean, I remember my parents talking about certain stuff. There's a lot more colorful language in what they used, and a lot more
Exactly.
about calling me an asshole. But the idea
Right.
was that some of
And
this
you
stuff
were.
was still there.
And you were.
Well, I mean, but it's the new shiny object. It's the new threat. This is all new, and you haven't seen this before. And every time we do that, every time we fall into that trap, well, now it's like, well, now we got to relearn everything. It's like,
Yep.
no, you don't. There is no new. Yes, fentanyl is the big one. So in 5 years, it's going to be something else, just like it was
Exactly.
5 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And 5 years before
But the
that, and
same
5 years
basic
before that.
principles, the delivery
But
system,
you brought
the
it up with
paraphernalia,
you
exactly.
brought it up with the and the point I was making about this. You brought up the training, and then you even talked about your kids. It's like, now it's, well, TikTok's the problem. It's the cell phones. It's like, no, it's your fucking parenting is the problem. You're like,
Exactly.
that's what it is. Like, I'm
But
sorry. Like,
why don't we talk about that?
well,
For
same
example,
thing. And every generation does oh,
yeah,
everyone's a snowflake pussy these days. It's like, yeah, hey, you made them that way. And now you're saying, I don't want my kid to have access to this, and I don't want them to see that, and they can't have this, and this is a danger. So you want to nerf the world? Okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah, they got a ribbon for 19th for showing up. Exactly. You can't
but
have in the same space.
you can't complain about the problem and play the victim, and then also be the one who's contributing to the problem.
Yeah,
I mean
yeah,
that's
but you
the
can.
issue.
That's called being American, right? And the idea is this. So how many times do we got to read that a kid found your gun and shot your
Yeah,
other kid?
yeah,
And then you talk to those persons and you say, it's a gun. Yeah, I got it. And you should have it locked up. Yeah, I bought the lock. I actually have a gun case. So why was it under the seat? Well, it's a different circumstance. You don't understand. I was going to this high crime area and I just forgot to put it back. What is that? That's human behavior. We could have predicted that and
yeah,
anticipated that, and human performance. Your limit of human performance is you're a lazy asshole and you didn't put your gun away. And I'm sorry that your kid's dead, but we can apply that knowledge to
yeah,
so many situations. We understand that if we don't control portion size, we'll overeat. We understand that if everything on your plate's the same color, you're probably going to get fat and die from some kind of thrombosis. We can anticipate that smoking is bad for you in a number of ways, and lack of sleep. So stop going that each of these are individual spirals that we have to control, and understand that there's an underlying architecture through all of it. Excess is never good. Extremism is never good. Hypervigilance is never good, right? Once
yeah,
we start casting those away, we come down to core competencies. And that's why, going back to Milo and Hoberman and the Goshcam sphere, the idea was behind it that if you take a 360 tempered, measured approach to danger and opportunity, you're going to be smarter, and you're going to be safer, and you're going to be harder to kill. And that's why we can't just throw the OODA loop up as a problem solver. We can't just say resilience. The new word is grit, by the way. If I read grit one more time
that's
today, I'm going to punch myself in the genitals, because, all we're doing, Brian, is renaming
just
it. And
renaming
you're saying,
things.
wow, it's grit. Well, there was a movie called True Grit. I remember it with John Wayne. And
Yeah.
before that, I'm sure
Is
that
that what you're talking
Socrates said
about? No,
grit.
I mean yeah, well,
Come on.
that's
We
the
get paid. We get paid by dusting off the shit that's been around forever and saying it's ours, and then throwing it up as if it's new, and emphasizing the third word instead of the first word. That's not training. That's believing in a bunch of hyperbole.
yeah,
Training means that you have to learn skills and then go out and apply them. And each time you do them, you'll get better at it. Presuppose that you took the training from a credible source. And I
yeah.
know that's hard nowadays.
That
Holy shit.
That
Everybody's
really
an
is.
instructor.
That
Everybody's certified.
Yeah, and that's you know, part of this too is everyone trying to figure out. I think, you know, we have a greater access to information than we've ever had before in history,
Oh,
right?
of course we do.
So like this is part of, I think, why so many people now talk about situation awareness, and actually information theory is now being talked about outside of the 15 people who were involved in, you know what I mean? Like it's such a small, you know, a lot of people have never even heard
Yeah,
of information theory, and then now it's sort of, this stuff is out there now because there's
exactly.
so much technology and so much information, and then we have to deal with it, and human factor stuff, and it's still screwed up. I mean, even though we were talking about the military spending billions of dollars researching this stuff and how humans interact with machines and the best way to do it so they
Yep.
could do it, the insurgents online classroom stuff that she has, it's a fucking mess. It's so disorganized, it's not intuitive, and they do everything on there now, and you're like, this is junk. How is a kid supposed to do it, let alone me?
Right.
She's going, well, I think it's in here. Well, I'm like, this is the least intuitive thing I've ever. How did no someone's making money off of it? You know what I
You
mean?
got
Well,
it.
so it's just, we kind of went to a bunch of different places and a few different spirals, but I think we
I
covered
know.
we covered everything. Going to need some after this call. You know, I think we covered a lot, and we got into to kind of what we talk about in you know, with situational awareness and anticipation, perception, and recognition, which I would probably
Yep.
couple those sort of together,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and that's the key. Remember, the reason I'm making a definition is you were asking me to
Yeah.
put a spotlight on them.
Yes.
So the spotlight on them is at its lowest elemental form. They are distinct and unique and deliberate. But when we're going at full speed, Brian, there's
It's a
there's three of
continue.
them,
It's just going.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then when we're going at the expert level, there's one of them.
Yeah.
It's called situational awareness. So don't come to me and say I'm a situational awareness expert
No,
because I took a course.
you can get
You know,
certified in that. I
yeah,
can
you
get an
can.
online certification in that from a group.
Yeah, you can be a priest too. You know what I'm
I
saying?
am.
So,
I'm an
yeah, I bet
ordained
you
minister,
are.
actually.
I really bet you
I've
are.
officiated one wedding and probably officiating another one, maybe the next year. So
Uh,
I went online to the website and I filled out the information and I paid whatever it was, and I've got the little card in my wallet. So if anyone
uh,
runs into me and sees me out there and needs me to perform an emergency wedding, or I believe it gives me funeral rights as well.
that'll come in handy. Uh, uh, so it'll come in handy after my next comment because a couple of your dear friends just got engaged, and I
Yeah.
want her to rethink it because I still think she's the Mac Daddy, the Daddy Mac, and I keep thinking I
You
may
saying
have
you
a
could
chance.
she could do
So
better?
she
So
could do better. Well, I know the guy, so yeah, she can. So I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
so,
I jest.
so he would agree. But
Yeah,
but
he was
so
violently and vehemently. Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. Now,
So
hey, here's the thing. Do your own research. You'll come to the same conclusion. And look, every time that I read something online where somebody comes up with a good idea, first go back and
it's
see if
been
there's
done.
studies about it.
Yeah.
And those people that studied it took a long time and a lot of money to come up with it. I'm not saying don't come up with good ideas, but don't throw something at me that was, detailed out 25 years ago as if it's an original idea. You got to do a little bit of the work
Yeah.
before you start going to social media. That's all I'm saying.
Well, social media is easier.
It is. It is because you're just on transmit. You can cut out all that receive and
Again.
listening thing, you
Well,
know?
yeah, I can choose whatever. I can choose my own adventure. Um,
Exactly.
All right. Anything else we need to kind of cover? That we covered a lot, and I want people listening to, reach out with questions
Yep.
that you have. You can always
Yep.
hit up leftofgreg@gmail.com about specific episode questions and everything, and we'd love to get
Yep.
into it. And I'm sure we'll probably give a couple more examples and talk about them on the Patreon side
Yeah, of
specifically.
course.
I know the one you did send me, I think would be good for that.
There's a couple
Oh,
for tomorrow that I
there's
think we should add to it.
a
Yeah.
lawsuit because someone followed a GPS straight into a body of water, right? And
Yeah. Off a bridge.
it's off right off a bridge.
Off a bridge that had been decommissioned and taken down so long ago. But
Yeah.
guess what? We
But
do that all the time.
it's the map's fault, not mine,
Yep.
you
You
know.
got it.
So but we can cover that on there. So we did get into a lot. Again, if anyone has any questions, please reach out. If you enjoy it, the episode too, please share it with your friends.
Yes.
Tell people about it. It helps us out a lot to get the word out. Leave a review or a comment or something on whatever podcast player that helps too. We do appreciate it. And don't forget that training changes behavior.